Dr. Gregory Hayes sneered, his voice resonating through his immaculate office in Phoenix, Arizona. I sat across from his mahogany desk and watched him, with the casual dismissal of someone who had never spent sleepless nights worrying about a 16-year-old who refused to leave her bedroom, go through my meticulously compiled therapy notes. This little anxiety treatment you've been tinkering with is nothing revolutionary, but we'll incorporate it into what Dr. Hayes was casually dismissing wasn't just tinkering. It was 3 years of developing what I called the adaptive response integration method, a therapeutic approach that had changed the lives of dozens of teenagers who had walked through our standard protocols. My name is Talia Jackson, and I'm 34 years old. I've worked as a licensed clinical social worker at Sunnundale Mental Health Center for the past 6 years, specializing in adolescent anxiety disorders. I had seen children who couldn't speak in front of others become self-assured advocates for their own mental health. The method combined cognitive behavioral techniques, mindfulness practices, and peer support elements. But what set it apart was the structured way sessions built upon one another, creating what I called anxiety bridges, safe pathways for teens to cross from their fear-based responses to healthier coping mechanisms. As I sat in Dr. Hayes' office that chilly February morning, watching him dismiss my life's work with a wave of his manicured hand, I felt something darker than disappointment sinking into my chest. I had witnessed teens who cut themselves develop healthy emotional regulation skills. This wasn't just another therapy protocol. It was a breakthrough that deserved recognition and proper implementation. He was already discussing rebranding the approach about presenting it at the next National Mental Health Conference under the clinic's name under his name. The clinic will naturally give you due credit as a contributing team member. He went on, not bothering to consult the papers. But this type of innovation calls for leadership vision, which comes from administrative experience rather than just therapeutic enthusiasm. I made myself keep my expression neutral, even as rage grew behind me. With a doctorate in business administration rather than psychology, Dr. Hayes had never conducted a single therapy session since taking over as clinic director 3 years ago. He was as knowledgeable about treating teenage anxiety as I was about performing brain surgery. But here he was, ready to take credit for work that had taken up all of my free time, and that had grown out of my sincere desire to help kids who reminded me of my own anxious teenage years. My ribs felt like a pressure cooker reaching its limit. Growing up in a home where my mother battled untreated anxiety had influenced my entire career path. I recall trying to help my mom deal with panic attacks when I was 12 years old while my dad worked double shifts at the shipping company back then. I knew that this wasn't just about professional recognition. It was about power control and the casual cruelty of someone who felt his position entitled him to claim ownership of other people's innovations. I decided to get a master's degree in clinical social work because of the lack of resources and the stigma associated with therapy, which prevented my family from getting help until my mother's illness got so bad that she was unable to leave the house for months. When I started working at Sunnundale Mental Health Center, right out of graduate school, I was determined to provide the kind of supportive environment my family had never experienced. At first, Dr. Hayes seemed like an ally, but he was new to the director, having taken over for the cherished Dr. Patricia Williams, who retired after 30 years of service. He spoke passionately about innovation and modernizing treatment approaches. At first, I was thrilled to work for someone who professed to value creative problem solving, but the early warning signs had been. He would attend my therapy sessions disguised as quality assurance, taking copious notes but providing little feedback, and he started asking for detailed reports about I was flattered by his interest and proud that my work was being recognized and appreciated. I even stayed up late on numerous occasions to type up detailed summaries of my sessions and note which techniques seemed to work best with different personality types. However, I was unaware that Dr. Hayes was creating a case study not to support my work, but to appropriate it. He had been observing me develop the adaptive response integration method from the beginning, learning every element and knowing exactly how to duplicate it without my help. I started peer support groups, modified mindfulness exercises for adolescent brains, and carefully planned sessions that developed resilience and trust. He kept track of everything that happened in my relationship with my boyfriend, Kevin, during this time. "You're pouring your whole life into that place," he had said during one of our increasingly frequent arguments. "But what are you getting out of it?" He was a paramedic, So he understood the demands of demanding careers. But even he had become frustrated with my long hours and obsessive focus on perfecting my therapeutic techniques. I dismissed his worries, thinking that my hard work would be acknowledged and rewarded. I had faith in Dr. I thought that good work would speak for itself, and that integrity and competence would ultimately triumph over office politics, when Hayes praised my innovative spirit and promised that my contributions would be appropriately acknowledged. As I sat in his office that February morning, listening to him methodically dismantle my professional identity, I realized how foolish I had been to trust someone who saw my passion as a weakness to be exploited rather than a strength to thrive. Weeks later, when I received an email invitation to attend the National Mental Health Conference as clinic support staff, I was completely taken aback by the heartbreaking realization of Dr. Hayes' true intentions. The agenda listed Dr. Hayes as the keynote speaker, introducing a groundbreaking new treatment approach known as the Hayes Integrated Response Protocol. As I read the session description, I realized that every technique I had was exactly the same as mine, developed over years of meticulous practice and refinement. I felt as though someone had reached into my chest and twisted my heart in their fist around me as I stared at my computer screen in our small shared office. My coworkers went about their work, totally unaware that I was going through what felt like professional murder. Dr. Hayes had taken my creativity, my passion project, and my contribution to the field of adolescent mental health, and he was getting ready to. The email stated that clinic staff were welcome to attend the presentation to see how administrative leadership translates grassroots therapeutic work into systematic treatment protocols. His condescension was astounding. He was genuinely inviting me to watch him take my life's work and present it as proof of his own genius. I eventually went to the restroom and locked myself in a stall. He presented it to hundreds of mental health professionals as his own creation. Every late night I had spent perfecting session protocols. Every weekend I had spent researching supporting literature. Every moment of sincere celebration when a teenager broke through their anxiety barriers. All of this had been reduced to fodder for Dr. Hayes' career advancement. So, letting the tears of anger and betrayal flow wasn't just about professional credit. It was about the fundamental violation of trust that made my chest feel hollow and raw. Dr. Hayes thought he could steal my work because he thought I was helpless to stop him. He saw me as just another disposable employee whose innovations could be harvested and repackaged without consequence. However, he was mistaken, and I returned to my desk with a new sense of purpose if Dr. Hayes so desired. I was wiping my eyes in the bathroom stall with rough institutional toilet paper when something inside me changed, turning the devastation into something harder and more focused. Claim ownership of my therapeutic approach. He would need to demonstrate that it was just as effective as I had shown, and more crucially, he would need to keep up the thorough documentation and outcome tracking that had initially made my work so successful. I started to create a plan that would call for patience, careful record keeping, and the kind of long-term strategic thinking that Dr. Hayes obviously thought I lacked. I would continue to develop my approach, but this time I would do it with a distinct objective in mind. I would establish an unwavering body of evidence that would eventually reveal his theft and return due credit to my work, because the adolescents I served deserved better than to have their advancement become a footnote to someone else's professional aspirations. The National Mental Health Conference was held in Denver during the third week of March, and I went as scheduled, sitting in the back row of the auditorium, like a spectator at my own execution. Dr. Hayes stood confidently as he addressed the crowded auditorium of mental health professionals while wearing a pricey navy suit that likely cost more than my monthly rent. He presented slides that highlighted his novel approach to treating teenage anxiety, saying that the Hayes Integrated Response Protocol is a breakthrough in adolescent mental health intervention. By carefully combining cognitive behavioral techniques with mindfulness exercises and organized peer support, we've achieved amazing results in populations that were resistant to treatment. I watched in awe as he presented my case studies, outcome, data, and meticulously documented progress notes, all of which were stripped of my name and repackaged as proof of his clinical genius. He talked about the anxiety bridge concept with the assurance of someone who had never really helped a terrified adolescent cross one. He also explained the integration of peer support. The audience was enthralled. and I could see heads nodding throughout the auditorium as mental health professionals took notes on techniques that I had developed through trial and error in countless therapy sessions. During the question and answer period, Dr. Hayes skillfully handled questions about implementation strategies and outcome measurements. It was as though he had personally designed the group dynamics that I had spent months perfecting. Of someone who had studied my work in great detail without ever really understanding its emotional underpinnings, Dr. Hayes asked a woman from the middle section, "How did you gain the confidence to try such an innovative approach with adolescent populations?" His response made my stomach turn. As clinic director, I have the administrative oversight to make sure that I bit my tongue so hard that I tasted blood, and he was taking credit not only for my methods, but also for the courage it took to develop them. He had never felt the weight of responsibility that came with genuine innovation in mental health treatment, nor had he ever experienced the anxiety that comes with trying an unproven technique with a suicidal teenager. New approaches are implemented safely and effectively. It's about having the leadership vision to see potential where others might see only challenges. After the presentation, I waited near the back of the auditorium as colleagues from other clinics approached Dr. Hayes with business cards and requests for collaboration. He was scheduling speaking engagements, discussing consulting opportunities, and building a professional network based solely on my stolen work. The injustice was so severe that it felt like a physical weight pressing down on me. I accepted applause for bravery he had never displayed. My shoulders, but something unexpected happened as I watched this professional theft play out. Rather than feeling defeated, I started to feel coldly analytical. Dr. Hayes had made a crucial mistake in his presentation. He had committed to replicating results that required a deep understanding of the therapeutic process rather than just surface-level understanding. Dr. Hayes had put himself in a position where he would have to actually deliver the results he was claiming credit for. I left the conference with a plan because he had made these promises in front of hundreds of mental health professionals who would be watching for published research, tracking outcome data, and expecting the kind of rigorous follow-up that legitimate innovation demanded. Dr. Hayes believed he had won by stealing my work, but in reality, he had given me the ideal opportunity to reveal his fraud. All I needed to do was keep refining my approach with the right paperwork, while he tried to keep up the appearance of competence using stolen techniques that he didn't really understand. After the conference, it felt like entering enemy territory, and Dr. Hayes was elated about his newfound. He strutted through the clinic halls with the assurance of someone who thought he had successfully repositioned himself as a thought leader in adolescent mental health, scheduling interviews with mental health journals and accepting invitations to speak at additional conferences. However, what he didn't realize was that his theft had actually released me from any obligation to safeguard his reputation or the clinic's interests. I started recording everything with the every therapy session was meticulously documented. Every outcome measurement was monitored with scientific rigor, and every innovation was time-stamped and observed by colleagues who could later attest to my continuous development of the therapeutic method. I also made the important decision that I would keep getting better and better at what I did, while Dr. Hayes was stuck presenting the version he had stolen. My relationship with Kevin reached a turning point during this time, and the night I returned from Denver, I finally told him everything about Dr. Hayes' theft and my plans. I started developing advanced techniques, exploring new applications, and pushing the boundaries of what the adaptive response integration method could achieve while he was giving the same presentation at conference after conference. In order to document and expose the professional betrayal that had been on my mind for months, he said, "I've been watching you disappear into this obsession for months, while seated across from me at our kitchen table. I understand you're angry, but is revenge really worth destroying your mental health?" I responded, but even as I said that, I knew it wasn't entirely true. If I don't expose what he's... Kevin looked at my face in the lamplight, and I could see him making a decision. "Okay," he said finally. "If this is what you need to do, I'll support you, but promise me you won't lose yourself in the process." That conversation marked a turning point in my strategy because I realized that I needed allies, people who could observe my ongoing work and later verify it. Done. He'll keep stealing from other therapists. The timeline of my innovations, I started to more intentionally involve my colleagues in the development of my methods. asking them for feedback on new approaches and inviting them to watch sessions where I tested advanced approaches. At the same time, Dr. Hayes was making increasingly extravagant claims about the efficacy of his methods in interviews with professional publications, claiming that the Hayes Integrated Response Protocol could transform adolescent. The irony of his attempts to monetize and scale techniques that he had never actually practiced based on understanding that was purely theoretical was astounding. He talked about licensing the approach to other clinics and creating training programs for mental health professionals if mental health treatment was widely implemented. However, his public promises were creating a paper trail of commitments that would eventually become evidence of his fraudulent. As he struggled to maintain credibility with stolen material, I started to view Dr. Hayes' theft not as a devastating setback, but as an incredible opportunity. He had unknowingly given me the ideal platform to show the difference between academic theft and genuine innovation. I would establish an unshakable foundation of original research that would eventually expose his fraud and establish my rightful place as the creator of this. 6 months after the Denver conference, Dr. Hayes' facade began to show signs of weakness. A mental health journal had asked for follow-up data on the Hayes Integrated Response Protocol, specifically for outcome measurements and case studies that showed long-term effectiveness. Dr. Hayes approached me in barely disguised desperation, asking for access to my patient files and session notes. He claimed to be trying to maintain his... I looked at him across his immaculate office, noting the stress lines around his eyes and the way his normally flawless hair showed signs of anxious running of fingers through it. "Of course, Dr. Hayes," I replied smoothly, in an authoritative tone, while obviously fishing for information. "I need you to compile comprehensive data on our anxiety treatment outcomes for the past year, because the Journal of Adolescent Mental Health wants to feature our program in their fall issue." He paused while explaining the standard metrics, success rates, patient satisfaction, and long-term follow-up results. He waved his hand vaguely and clearly, hoping that I would fill in the details he was unable to provide. I noticed that I was maintaining a neutral expression as I asked, and he asked which version of the protocol I should concentrate on, the original implementation from last year, or the revised version we've been working on this quarter. There was a longer pause this time, and Dr. Hayes was unaware that I had kept improving the technique following his theft. He believed that therapeutic innovation was a one-time accomplishment, rather than a continuous process of improvement and refinement. Lastly, his voice revealed the first hints of doubt I had heard from him that evening when I worked late in the clinic. Not in order to assist Dr. Hayes with his data request, but rather to arrange my own thorough documentation, I spent the last year creating something far more substantial. I had thorough session notes, outcome measurements, patient testimonials, colleague observations, and, most importantly, proof of ongoing innovation that went well beyond what Dr. Hayes had initially requested. I had developed specialized approaches for anxiety disorders, complicated by trauma, eating disorders, and stress related to social media. These innovations were documented with the same rigorous attention to detail that had characterized my original work. But now I was doing it with full awareness. I had also taken my advanced techniques, which included what I called anxiety archaeology, which helped teens trace the historical roots of their anxious responses to develop more targeted coping strategies. The most important development regarding the professional and legal ramifications was my cooperation with Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a university researcher who had contacted me after learning about my work through professional networks. She was interested in carrying out a formal study of my therapeutic approach, complete with control groups, statistical analysis, and peer review terminology. She had stated in our initial meeting that what you've developed has the potential to significantly influence how we treat anxiety disorders in adolescents. Would you be interested in co-authoring a research paper that details your approach and its results? The opportunity was ideal. A peer-reviewed publication would place my work in the academic record with appropriate credit and thorough scientific validation. But more significantly, it would establish a timeline that would reveal Dr. Hayes' theft in comparison to his conference presentations. I felt a genuine excitement about my professional future as I worked late that night, organizing data, and preparing materials for Dr. Walsh's research study. I wasn't just defending my stolen work. I was creating something that would completely surpass it. The research paper that Dr. Walsh and I submitted to the American Journal of Clinical Psychology was accepted for publication 18 months later. Our study, Adaptive Response Integration Method, a novel approach to adolescent anxiety treatment with long-term outcome data, was published immediately after Dr. Hayes's theft. It detailed 3 years' worth of patient outcomes and established a clear timeline of innovation that preceded all of Dr. Hayes's public presentations. Colleagues in the mental health community who had attended Dr. Hayes's conferences started asking the Journal of Adolescent Mental Health, which had published Dr. Hayes's work 6 months prior, asked for clarification regarding the relationship between the Hayes Integrated Response Protocol and our published method. When the journal article went live online, Dr. Hayes called me into his office. His normally composed demeanor broke down, exposing the desperate man beneath his professional facade. "This is a serious problem, Talia," he continued, his voice devoid of its customary authoritative tone, his hands trembling slightly as he held a printed copy of our research report. "You've created confusion in the field about our clinic's innovations. People are questioning the integrity of our programs." Despite the importance of the moment, I sat across from him feeling strangely at ease. "I don't understand your worry. This is the clinic's intellectual property, Dr. Hayes. As an employee, you developed this work using our resources in our patient population. In fact, I responded by bringing out a folder I had prepared for this exact conversation and my employment. Contract stipulates that therapeutic innovations be developed. The paper clearly documents my therapeutic method and its development timeline, and all the data is accurate and verifiable." His voice rose sharply. The color left his face as he realized the legal and professional trap he had stepped into. The psycho investigation started 3 weeks after our paper was published, when the National Mental Health Professional Ethics Board launched a formal inquiry into claims of intellectual property theft. I have also documented that this work was developed primarily during my own time using resources I personally acquired. While the clinic's board of directors conducted their own internal review, Dr. Hayes was placed on administrative leave due to fraudulent academic claims. The evidence was overwhelming, as I had meticulously documented the development of my methods, including timestamps, witness statements, and documentation of every innovation. At the same time, Dr. Hayes was unable to provide any proof of his own contributions to the therapeutic approach he claimed to have. Almost immediately after the fraud was discovered, insurance companies started to doubt whether treatments given under false credentials would be covered, causing a financial crisis that threatened the clinic's entire operations. Sunningdale Mental Health Center had received large grants based on Dr. Hayes's purported innovations, money that had to be returned. My colleagues' responses were: a few acknowledged that they had suspected Dr. Hayes's claims were too good to be true, but had been too intimidated by his position to speak up. Others expressed outrage on my behalf, angry that they had unwittingly contributed to the promotion of stolen work. One evening, Kevin found me in our kitchen reading yet another email from a journalist requesting interviews about the scandal. "What is the sensation?" "Regaining your recognition," he inquired. I gave his question careful thought, and while I was pleased with my professional recognition, what felt more important was the restoration of my integrity and the affirmation of each kid whose advancement had been marginalized in someone else's career aspirations. "It feels like justice," I said. "The most appropriate part of my retaliation, not only for me but also for every patient whose story was stolen along with my work, was not to ruin Dr. Hayes's career, but to elevate the work to its rightful place in the field of adolescent mental health treatment." As I thought back on this lengthy journey from theft to vindication, I realized that Dr. Hayes had unintentionally given me the greatest gift possible: the drive to demonstrate that genuine academics are constantly defeated by creativity, fraud, and that occasionally the most effective retaliation is just allowing that the truth speaks for itself.